Okay, welcome to the next video in the Sampler Spree Slow Along. And this is for block 6 called Kites, and it can be found on page 18 of Susan Aki's book, The Sampler Spree. So, this one is a fun one. This is the first time we are using templates, okay? And you have two options with this block. You can actually, there is a secret option C, which is not so secret. So 3 options with this block. You can take, I've used graph paper, you can use lined paper, any kind of thin paper that you can see through. And you could go ahead and do what I've done here, which was just trace these templates onto the paper and then cut them out. I suggest doing this because these are very specific templates to just this block, and unless you plan on making a ton of them, which I don't know what you're about, so maybe you are, so keep that in mind, but I'm not going to be doing a lot. So I use something super disposable because I'm just going to chuck them. Not a big deal. If you are going to make more of these, then I suggest maybe going over to the Dollar Tree or any, your favorite dollar store and getting those super, super thin cutting mats that are like flexible, and using that to trace your template, and then just use a piece of sandpaper or even like emery board to smooth the edges of the plastic once you've cut it out. And then those ones are way more solid than paper, and they're more, you can use them, reuse them way more. So that's option 2. Option 3 would be to skip this block altogether and then do one of the extra blocks at the end of the book, so that you could avoid using templates altogether, which in this week of the Slow Along week 3, I've included an extra block in case you want to skip this. And actually, I'm just thinking of all these options as I'm going through it. A 4th option for you is to use the block lock ruler. And so on page 7 of Susan Aki's book, she also describes there's a very specific block lock ruler that you can use that will also give you these templates. So it's really up to you how much you want to invest. You either want to invest 0 time whatsoever, skip this block and go add an additional one. That's totally fine. If you want to have a minimal investment like I've done here, just use graph paper or any kind of thin paper you have lying around to create these. You can go ahead to the Dollar Tree and make more sturdy versions of these by getting a super flexible, thin cutting mat and doing that. Or you can use the block lock ruler that Susan Aki suggests, because there's a specific block lock ruler that will make these templates as well. So those are your 4 options there. Now, as far as making the templates, you'll notice in your book, and this goes for a lot of templates because it's just easier for printing wise, your A template, it just says, cut 4 of them. Pretty straightforward. And that's because it's perfectly symmetrical piece. So, it really doesn't matter. Now, your B piece is not symmetrical, which means you can't, if you flip it over, you're getting a different shape, which if you're using solids, if you're using solid fabric, you can just use it all on one side and you can make them all identical, because when you flip over a piece of solid fabric, it's the same on both sides. If you're using print fabric like I am, I can't just flip this over because the other side of my fabric is not printed and it won't be as pretty. So I need to make reverses. Now in the book, it shows, cut 2 and then do a reverse 2, or cut 4 and do a reverse 4. What you can do is just cut the one template, and then when you're tracing it onto your fabric, flip it over. And now it's going in the other direction. Just make sure, like I've done here, I wrote the letter of the template, B, on it, just so that I know what side is what. So I know, okay, I need 2 with the B up, 2 with the B down. Okay? So that's what we want to keep in mind when we're doing reverses. Now, what did I use to trace it? I used, and this is my favorite craft marker, fabric marker of all time, and I'm gonna kind of see if you can see that. Hopefully it kind of comes into focus. There we go. It is the Crafts for All, and I believe they refer to it as the laundry pen. This is a no bleed, no fade, awesome marker. You can use a permanent marker like this because your lines are going to end up in your seam allowance. You're not going to see them. Now, otherwise, I would use either a water-soluble or an air erasable pen just so that they go away. But in this case, you're not going to see it. These lines are either getting cut off or they're going to be in your seam allowance. So either way, you're not going to see them. So that's my little shtick on the templates. Now let's get to actually creating our block. Now, like I do for all of the blocks, and if you're at this point with me and you're already on block 6 with me, you know I like to lay out my pieces exactly how they'll look in the block. It is a little tricky pants. Let's turn this light back on, or maybe not, I don't know. That was a little, it actually looked a little bit better. Anyway, it's a little tricky pants to lay these out properly because you're kind of like, oh, that fits, oh, it doesn't fit. What you want to be thinking of is that each of these quadrants should make a square. And so to do that, you will have your long diagonal side of template B. You know, you've got the 90-degree angle, and then you've got this long diagonal side. That goes against your kite piece. And so if you know that that goes against your kite piece, you can kind of flip-flop until you get it so that you end up with the square, okay? But that's kind of the trickiest part of this block. This is a super straightforward block. It's a lot of fun to put together. Super straightforward chain piecing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to attach this piece to this piece, this piece to this piece, this piece to this piece, and this piece to this piece, press it, then I'm going to attach the opposite end pieces, press it, and then it's just putting together the 4-patch. Really, really straightforward. So let's get sewing. And when you're lining these up, line them up from the corner into the middle. So when I say that, like this is your outer, this is your centerpiece. These two edges are supposed to line up together. And so I start by lining these up, and then I line everything up coming down. It's just, you gotta pick a starting point. If you wanna start it from the other end, you totally can. But I just like to pick a side and then make it consistent the whole way through the block. If that's the side you're starting to line up on, line it up that way the whole way through. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press all of these, and then I will see you back here so that we can attach the other side. Okay, so I am back from the pressing mat, and I am just placing these back in where they belong so that I can kind of see how they... I always place all of my pieces as I press right back into the square where they belong, right into the block, so that I can see how things are going and make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. That's also the quickest way for you to see a mistake, and I'd rather catch mistakes as I'm going than at the end and have to rip it all out. So, here we go. Next, we're gonna do the exact same chain piecing, but for the other side. So I'm gonna be attaching this to this, this to this, this to this, and this to this. So I'm gonna chain piece it, press it, and then it's just time to put together our 4 patch. So now I'm just trimming these parts apart, and then it's time to go press them. If you watched my earlier videos, I found my trimmers. So that's pretty exciting for me. Okay, so I am done pressing. So we're placing these blocks back in. And now it's time to just do a classic 4 patch. So we'll sew these to this and this to this, press it, and then we will sew our top row to our bottom row. When we're lining them up, you may notice that you've got like a little bit of wonkiness. That's okay. That's the kind of stuff, it's easy to hide this stuff in the seam allowances, so don't worry. Also, keep in mind, in Susan's book, you may notice that like these corners go all the way to the edge of the block, but it doesn't on your sewn piece. It's not supposed to. The pictures of the blocks in the books are finished, meaning that's what it's gonna look like when it's completely sewn into your quilt top. So these extra bits around the edges, that's your seam allowance. It's supposed to be there. So don't worry if it's not exact when it comes to the spacing off of your points, okay? So keep that in mind. When we're lining this up due to this little wonkiness, what we wanna do is we want to make sure that the edges of this seam where, you know, the edge of this kite piece and the outer background fabric meets on both sides, they touch. And when you flip this over, so you fold them one on top of another to actually stitch the seam, that this seam matches up with this seam. So as long as those seams match up with their counterpart on the other block, you're gonna be just fine, okay? And like I said, there might be a little bit of wonkiness. That's okay. That's gonna all stitch out in the seam allowance, as long as we have aligned those seams properly. Okay, time to press. All right, so we are back from the pressing table. And now it's one more time. We're just gonna stitch this top row to the bottom row. This is where I start pinning. So I'm gonna pin to make sure that this center seam aligns with this center seam. And I mean, that's the most important one. Once this gets lined up, it should all fall in place. But I may also pin these outer seams here just to make sure we get a nice, good, clean look. But that one will be more dependent upon how the seams lay. That's actually lining up pretty nicely, but I don't want to jinx anything, so let's go ahead and pin it. As is this side, but again, why tempt fate? So let's go ahead and pin it. then we're gonna go ahead and stitch. And don't forget, when we're sewing, remove your pins before you get there. So now I'm gonna head on over to my pressing station, and then we will see our completed kites block in just a moment. And there you have it, folks. This is the finished product. This is block 6 in the Susan Aki Sampler Spree book. It is called Kites. I cannot wait to see what yours looks like. Go ahead and either leave it in the Facebook group or tag it on social media using the hashtag Sampler Spree Slow Along. Can't wait to see it. Happy sewing!